Hey everybody, my name is Mike. My channel is MDH5169. Thanks for tuning into the vlog. Today I want to talk about my 2007 Mustang GT500. A little history on the car. Just about everybody who has a driver's license has heard the name Carroll Shelby. If you don't know who he is, he was a racer way back in the day, and his health forced him to retire from racing. So he got involved with Ford, also got involved with some other auto manufacturers, but Ford is really the big one that he got involved with and worked with them for many years. Carroll is actually responsible for the Shelby Cobra, and if you're not familiar with that car, I'll be doing a video on that real soon, so stay tuned for that. But he also came up with the GT350 and the GT500. Now the GT350 was primarily more of a track car, more for going around corners, handling that type of thing. The GT500 was the big horsepower, straight line, fast car. And the first actual GT500 debuted in 1967 and ran for a few years, I think into the early 70s, and then they got rid of it. Emissions and things like that kind of changed things, so horsepower wasn't king there through the mid 70s, as many people know. But in 2007, Ford decided to bring back the GT500, so they partnered with Carroll. They got together, and this is what they came up with. It's basically a 5.4 liter V8 with a supercharger thrown on top. The goal was to get 500 horsepower out of the car, which they did very well. Now, one thing to remember when we're talking about horsepower, the manufacturers talk about crank horsepower, and what that means is they take a motor with nothing else hooked up, they put it in a controlled environment with proper fuel, proper air fuel mixture, and they run it on their dyno, and they run several times. And so what's coming out of the crank, which is the back of the motor before it gets to the transmission, the rest of the drive line and everything like that, and that's how they measure horsepower. So the goal was 500 horsepower of this car. Now you can always figure out a little bit of loss through the drivetrain. Generally speaking, the rule of thumb before was an automatic, you lose about 20% of your power through the drivetrain. And that means basically going through the transmission, the drive line, the rear end, and transferring out to the tires, and what you actually net horsepower to the ground, to the rear wheel. So you'll see rear wheel horsepower and crank horsepower, so those are two different things. Rear wheel horsepower is really what's important. And like I said, generally speaking, the rule of thumb was you lose about 20% for an automatic, about 15% for a manual. Now, since vehicles have gotten a little bit more efficient, so now good rule of thumb is about 15% drivetrain loss for an automatic and anywhere from 10 to 12% for a manual. Most everything that I read on this car said about 12%. Subtract about 12% and that'll get you your rear wheel horsepower. So when I got this car, I'm thinking, okay, it's got 500 horsepower, probably about 440, 435, somewhere in that area to the rear wheel, which sounded pretty good to me. Now let me jump over and tell you why I actually wanted to buy this car. Basically, it's very simple. I'm looking at YouTube videos, I'm looking at cars, and I remember I was looking at Hellcats, I was looking at GT500s, and what do they have in common? Well, they're both supercharged. And if you haven't heard a supercharged car, when it's getting into boost and making that power and you hear that whine, it is an amazing sound. It is like a symphony. And I just fell in love with it. So I decided I wanted a car that was supercharged. So lo and behold, basically it was between the GT500 and the Hellcat, which I think the Hellcat's an amazing car. I was very interested in it. But let me tell you my thinking and why I didn't go with the Hellcat. At the time, I had a C6 Corvette, which if you look through my videos, you'll see I actually have a little video of a 5 to 120 mile an hour run with the C6. I thought the C6 was pretty fast, 400 horsepower. It seemed pretty impressive to me. So I'm thinking if this thing's got 500 horsepower, even though it's a heavier car, it's gonna be impressive, right? And I'm gonna be happy with it. So with the Hellcat, I'm thinking, do I really need 707 horsepower? Yes, I know. That's what I was thinking at the time. I did say that. But also the Hellcat was twice the price, so that was one factor. Another thing about the newer Challengers is they have a lot of blind spots. I don't know if any of you guys have driven them, but I have driven a couple of the newer Challengers, and the blind spots are horrible with it, whereas this car does not have those blind spots. Also, another thing that I really didn't like about the Hellcat at the time was the Hellcat only had 275 tires on the rear. Now that's been remedied with the wide body Hellcat Challenger that's coming out, that's got the 305s all the way around. A lot more meat, a lot more rubber. But at the time with the 275 rear tire, a 700 plus horsepower car, to me that just didn't add up, didn't make sense. Even this car's got 285s on it. So I went on ahead and went with the GT500. I'm actually very glad that I did, and I'm glad I ended up getting the 2007, because I did look at 2010s and newer, and like the 2010 did have a little bump in horsepower. I think it's 550, and some of the newer ones actually went up to 636 horsepower, which is very impressive. The new GT500s are rumored to be up in the 800 horsepower range. We're going to soon find that out, I think. But I was really pretty content to just get this one to go with the 500 horsepower. Also, with this being the first year that they were built, they only built like 10,000 a year for the first couple of years. And according to Haggerty, these are future collectibles. So I'm kind of glad I went with this one. I like the body style, I like the shape of it. So lo and behold, I go ahead and I get this car. And I'm driving it for a little while, and I've decided, yeah, maybe it would be kind of fun to do a couple bolt-ons. Nothing internal. I didn't want to do heads and cam and nitrous and things like that, but maybe just to see if there's a little bit more lurking inside of it. So I go over to Stark Weathers here in Turlock and talk to them about it, and they said, yeah, you know, we can do a few things on these cars, a few bolt-ons, get you another 75 horsepower or so, which at the time I'm thinking is great. I'm thinking if I've got 440 right now at the rear wheel and I get another 75 horsepower, that's going to be what, 515? And I was really shooting for 500 at the rear wheel. I was going to be very happy with that. So we went and did a base dyno, which I do have a video of that here on my channel. You can check it out. And the car actually base dynoed at 470 rear wheel horsepower. In the video it says 475. I was wrong. I apologize. It was actually 470. So I was very pleased with that in the first place. And this car is completely stock. Nothing had been done to it. So once they did their tuning and all the little bolt-ons, which includes an upper pulley, a hotter set of plugs, cat delete, cold air intake, and a tune, I actually gained that 75 horsepower. So basically what that comes down to is at the crank this thing's over 600 horse. Not that impressive by today's standards. There's a lot of cars out there with 1,000, 12, even 1,500 horsepower, but you know what, for me it's great. The car moves, the car scoots very well. I'm very, very happy with it. I really can't keep the tires under it in the first couple of gears, so it's all the car I need. And I've got my Z06, which is actually a little bit faster than this, so I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy with the outcome. Like I said, I love the supercharger whine, and I can't wait for you guys to go for a ride with me and hear that whine. It is just, it's phenomenal. I love it. I just think it's the coolest thing. Things that I've done to the car, basically when I got it, it already had the tinted windows. It already had a different stereo, head unit stereo in it. And that was basically it. So I did all the little bolt-on mods and had that taken care of. Also did the sequential turn signals, as you saw in the opening video. So, because I think that is just really, really cool. I like the new Mustangs with the sequential turn signals. It's taken from the old Thunderbirds. I always thought that was very cool, so I had to have that on this car. But other than that, the car is pretty stock. I have considered the possibility of maybe lowering the car an inch, inch and a half, and maybe putting some different rims and tires on it. But I really do want to keep the car stock, as close to stock as possible, because I want to be able to return it to stock when I do go to sell it, which I will sell it eventually. I actually came very close to trading the car for an older Camaro. I've always wanted a first-gen Camaro, and I almost traded for that. But quite honestly, I didn't want to lose a supercharger whine. And my Z06, even though it is supercharged, you don't hear the supercharger at all. I've been told it's because it's a flatter supercharger, and this is not. And that's one of the reasons. I'm not really sure. Maybe some of you might know, so you can certainly leave me a message and let me know what you know and enlighten me with your education. I would really appreciate it. But that is one of the biggest reasons why I kept this, because I was really just going to get rid of my newer cars and have the Corvette as my only new car and just have older cars. But I'm glad I've hung on to it. I really like the car. It's a lot of fun to drive. It's a nice riding car. You'll see when I take you for a little spin, it's a lot of fun. It's a blast to drive. So I like the color combination. I think it's a very cool color combination. And yeah, with that, I guess that's really about all I have to say on the car. I think right now it's about time to take it for a drive. All right, setting out in the GT500. I have to say that when this thing was stock, before the cats were removed, it was actually very quiet. I was surprised how quiet it was. But removing the cats definitely opened it up a little bit. Now, the only problem with not having cats is in California, every other year I have to smog the car in order to register it, which really sucks. And of course, with no cats, it won't pass smog. So I'm thinking that perhaps I will put maybe some high flow cats on it, and maybe a catback exhaust down the road when I do have to smog it. I didn't have to smog it this year, so I will have to next year, just so it'll pass smog and I don't have to make the changes every time. So I could take it back to Stark Weathers, but they would charge me like $500 to put it back to stock and everything like that, and that's just not something that I really want to have to do every other year, in addition to registration and in addition to paying for the smog. So so the car is a very nice driving car. It actually rides pretty good. Can't say much for the gas mileage. Of course, I rarely ever keep my feet out of it. So I guess that's something to consider too. But it is a nice driving car. Shifts great. I did have to put a new clutch in it. I probably should have thought about it when I first bought the car, but I noticed the clutch was very stiff and it grabbed at the very top of the throw, which is an indication that the clutch is going out. So I should have probably thought about that, but that's okay. Got a good clutch in it, and it'll handle a lot of horsepower, a lot more than I'm ever going to be throwing at it. So, and it should last me forever, for that matter. Driving impressions. I mean, the car handles pretty well. It's not really made to go around corners, like I said before. It's just made more for straight line performance, and it does that very well. It gets a lot of attention. I'm really impressed and amazed at how much attention this car does really get. I've driven a number of my vehicles to work when I was working, and I had an old T-Bird, I had a Viper, my C6 Corvette, and this is the only car I can honestly say that just about everybody in the office was outside kind of oogling it and talking about it and asking questions about it, and still would ask questions up until the time I retired. So, getting a little bit of heat in it. It's not quite warmed up yet, and I don't like to step on them too much until they're warmed up, but once it gets warmed up, I can step into it a little bit. You can hear that supercharger whine that I'm talking about, because it is really awesome. Now, I will apologize. The county I live in, the roads, well, they're just not the smoothest roads out there, so I apologize for that. We're going to hit a lot of bumps. You're going to hear them, you're going to see it. I'll do the best I can, but there's just no really good roads around this place. Be careful with this Viper, it'll get away from you, it'll do this, it'll do that. I mean, you think your GT500's fast, it's nothing compared to the Viper. And I gotta say, I think if this thing could hook up, I think this thing would have smoked the Viper. I really do. It's just getting this thing to hook up. The Viper had 345 tires in the rear end, so even though it didn't have traction control, it hooked up pretty well. I didn't have too much spinning with it. This has got 285 tires in the rear, and they're not really the best tires for hooking up, so they do tend to want to break loose. I've broken this thing loose even in third gear. So traction is an issue with this car, as you can see earlier by that pull, but man, it is fun. It is fun. It will keep you on your toes. So now the tires are warmed up a little bit, we can probably do another pull here pretty soon. Alright, so back in the shop, made it back alive, lived to tell about it. It should be noted that the videos that you saw of me getting into it Air conditioning was also on at that time. It's pretty warm here this morning already, so I was running the air conditioning. So yeah, I mean, the car definitely moves. Of course, there are cars out there that, you know, well over 1,000 horsepower nowadays. You see them all over the internet, all over YouTube and everything like that. And this is nothing like that. This is a very streetable, very drivable, a few bolt-ons anybody can do to their vehicles. And that's kind of the way I like them. You know, to me, I mean, I said this before, like I didn't need 707 horsepower with a Hellcat. Okay. Yeah, now I'm up to where I've got vehicles, you know, the Vet 650 and this is over 600 and everything like that, and I sit there and think, I don't need any more than that, but who knows? Down the road, I may do a few more things to this. I'm thinking of maybe a couple things to the Vet, but I'll talk more about that when I do the video on the Vet. But really, I mean, these cars are just incredibly fast, and for basically factory cars, it's just amazing. I'm going to say it again, it's a great time to be a car enthusiast with all these really cool cars out on the market. I mean, you can pick up a used GT500 like this one for, you know, mid-20s, and you've got a lot of performance, you've got that beautiful supercharger whine, and I mean, really, who could ask for anything more? It's awesome. A lot of performance for the buck, so a great time to be a car enthusiast. So with that, I'm going to say thanks so much for watching the video. Something I did want to touch bases on. Last time I thanked all of my subscribers individually, and then I started looking back and I realized some subscribers I can't see. Some of them are private and what have you. So unfortunately my plan is not going to work, whereas I wanted to get on and thank new subscribers and what have you each time they signed up. I'm not going to be able to do that, so I'm just going to thank all of you as a whole. I think I'm up to like 28 now, and I appreciate each and every one of you. You know, tell your friends, you got people that are interested in cars. A lot more is coming, so I'm going to have a lot more going on. If you're stopping in for the first time, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, follow me on Instagram, MDH5169. Feel free to send me a message, let's talk. Let's chat about cars. I love doing that. And with that, thanks so much for watching. God bless and have a great day.